The syncretic myths originating from the Spanish arrival, their expansion and consequences in the lands of Anahuac up to the present day. Where one could appreciate temples, pyramidal bases, ball courts, etc. For 300 years we saw churches everywhere, but way before, neither Jesus, not the Virgin, nor any saint or archangel ever appeared. Despite the Bible mentioning that Jesus resurrected and then appeared several times to his apostles, giving them instructions. Or, like his mother, the Virgin of Guadalupe, already in this continent, effortlessly made flowers appear on the Tepeyac hill that only existed in Europe in 1531, as well as projecting her image on a cloth to demonstrate the power of God and his son Jesus. There was never a miraculous appearance of this kind until the Spaniards intervened on the continent. An example of this is the Virgin of Remedies and its syncretism with Mayahuel. Regarding this, let's refer to the official version. The Virgin of Remedies will have been the first Christian figure on the continent, which is this, a small image holding the child Jesus. It arrived in 1519 with one of the Hernán Cortés soldiers named Juan Rodríguez Villafuente, who might have brought it from Alcaranta in Extremadura or from Tolosa in Vasconia, where it was worshipped. The figure accompanied them since they left Cuba, and in its honor, the first Mass on the land was celebrated in Villarrica de la Veracruz, passing then thought Zempoala, Tlaxcala, Cholula, until Tenochtitlan. There, Cortés, with Moctezuma's consent, ordered Villafuente to place a cross and the Virgin in the Templo Mayor, in the Huitzilopochtli shrine. Despite the complaints and annoyance of the Mexicas, although another version states it was another image called the Conqueror, venerated during the viceroyalty in the Puebla Cathedral. But whichever it was, it stayed in the Templo Mayor for months. However, on the 9th of June 1520, the Spaniards or the Israelites fled thought the Tlacopan causeway, and in their escape, Villafuente took her with him. In their escape, they took refuge in a final resting place, even if only for a few hours, a place far from Tenochtitlan in an area inhabited by Otomi people. A version that demystifies the supposed theories of Cortés under a cypress in Popotla. This Otomi area was located in what is now Naucalpan, in the state of Mexico. These Otomi were not allies of the Mexicas, and therefore they provide them with food, healing, and shelter. Villafuente, to prevent the image from being captured, hid it under a maguey on the top of the hill, then called Otoncapulco, where the sanctuary of Remedies is located today. After a few hours, the Spaniards left the place, and we all know the story. The survivors managed to escape to Tlaxcala, from where, months later, they returned with more than 100,000 allies and surrendered Tenochtitlan and Tlatelolco in 1521. However, the image was not seen again until 19 years later, until 1540, when a man called Secuatli in Nahuatl and baptized as Juan Tobar or Juan del Águila, chef of the town of San Juan Totoltepec, located today next to the sanctuary, found at the top of the hill under a maguey the small Virgin and Child, building a hermitage near his house to worship her. But another version indicates that Juan Tobar, infected by the plague, went to beg the Virgin of Tepeyac for his healing. Supposedly, the Virgin spoke to him, saying that both occasions were the same Mother of God, healing him instantly, but ordering that a hermitage be made for her on the summit of that hill. This healed man worshipped her in his house, but the image disappeared several times and went to the Otoncapulco hill until a small temple was built for her by 1550. Obviously, believers, and especially the Catholic Church, then adopt these miraculous versions, assuming that the Virgin Villafuente hid and the one later found by Secuatli were the same. But these official versions, as often happens, conceal, minimize, omit, or even ignore data that surrounds the miraculous tales, explaining from here on what, despite having happened more than 500 years ago, is still there. Data that together will give rise to the syncretism of Mayahuel and the Virgin of Remedies. Usually, the tales that are turned into series, movies, and animations of the appearances of Christ, the Virgin, or saints omit mentioning that in the places where celestial beings supposedly appeared, there were previously very important pre-Hispanic temples and altars. For example, on the Tepeyac, one dedicated to Tonantzin, and on that of Remedies, another. Most people think that here was a temple of Mayahuel, but others are two other possibilities. One, that it was a sanctuary of Otontecutli, Lord of Fire and the Dead, who the Otomi people worship. And the other possibility refers to a sanctuary of Toki, the old grandmother, mother of the divinities, but it is also possible that they worshipped all three beings there, possibly having several platforms dedicated to them, and admitting that possibly, perhaps as another form syncretism in relation to these three possible figures worshipped on the site. Today, we have remains of them in the church itself, having in the central part of the Virgin of Remedies assimilated with Mayahuel. But on the sides, it has status of Saint Joachim and Saint Anne, the parents of the Virgin Mary and grandparents of Jesus, having the parallelism of Otontecutli, as the old Lord of the Fire with Saint Joachim and Saint Anne, an old woman with Toki. Considering that these three figures in the original version mix with Christianity, could explain that Saint Joachim, like Otontecutli the fire, helps his wife, Saint Anne, Toki, the earth, to give life to her daughter Mary, who sprouts the earth like the Mayahuel in pre-Hispanic cosmology. As we said, it is not convenient to say that there were platforms there and that these were destroyed and buried. But this could even have been more than altars, being observatories built for the benefit of the new worship, because we have the location of the temple where the protagonist Mayahuel was located and privileged location. Current archaeological studies indicate that there was an imaginary axis from the Otoncapulco hill, with what is now called the Peñón de los Baños hill, which at that time was called Tepetzinco. Between them, an imaginary line is formed, which passes where the main temple of Tlatelolco is located. Obviously, the hills are older than the main temple of Tlatelolco, but that line that connects these hills will have been the guide to place the temple there, and to create the Tlacopan-Nonoalco causeway. And if that were not enough, we have another axis that interacts with that one mentioned above, called Tenayuca-Culhuacan, which runs from Tenayucan in the north of Culiacan, in the south of the lake. An axis that coincides with the location of three main temples, this being Tenayucan, Tlatelolco and Tenochtitlan. Considering that both axes have as their central point where the Tlatelolco temple is located, this axis will have the basis for the distribution of the Mexica island. Thus, the current hill of Remedies, according to this theory, helped to fix the urban layout of Tlatelolco and Tenochtitlan at least. In addition, the current temple of Remedies has the same orientation as the church of Santiago Apóstol de Tlatelolco, where the entrance of both churches point west. An orientation that was copied from the main temple of Tlatelolco, which its stairways also point towards where the sun hides. So certainly the sanctuary that was in the current Remedies must have had the same orientation. And although, obviously, it is not longer exists and certainly its remains are still under the church. Today, astronomical alignments of the church are still given in relation to the sunrise of a specific date of the year, which in September 1st or 2nd, the day of which the celebration of the Virgin of Remedies began, an alignment that were appreciated in this photo, where the dome of the church on September 1st aligns with the sunshine from east. This alignment is achieved by drawing an imaginary line on those days, September 1st and 2nd, in which the sun rises behind the Tlamacas hill, but also on this line it passes over the Tepeyac hill, thus linking both pre-Hispanic and Spanish sanctuaries. This astronomical alignment cuts section of the pre-Hispanic calendar, and that knowledge was later used to build the church and to place the current celebration of the Virgin on that astronomical event. Therefore, it was not an accident that the hill was chosen for the supposed appearance of the Virgin of the Remedies. Now, let's talk about the association of Mayahuel and the Virgin. The Spanish conqueror hid her in a maguey, and then the indigenous men discovered her. And within the church, they placed a plaque where they say the supposed location of this clearly omitting on the plaque they mention that there were or the several sanctuaries, as we have already seen. Whether this is the authentic sanctuary or not, with the passage of the time and the convenient geographic deposition that was chosen, it acquired other elements, because some paintings of the maguey and today the central places where she is placed has an imitation of it. The maguey is the quintessential symbol of Mayahuel, the lady of the countless breeds with which she breastfed animals and humans alike. And in their worldview, especially in the cultures of the basin, seeing a maguey was seeing Mayahuel. Obviously, there are representations in origin codices that paint Mayahuel and a maguey, which speaks from themselves. And of course, if we contrast them with the painting of the Virgin of Remedies, they give us a clear clue as to who they represent. Even unintentionally, the promoters of the Virgin's myth left traces of the association with the Lady of Pulque. Because within the church, there is an image that seeks to represent the indigenous man who discovered the Virgin, and he carries a ground with which pulque is still extracted today, without leaving the supposed discoverer of demonstrating the little understanding of the original worldview on the part of the church. We have a plaque that explains the character where we see his name in Spanish already baptized and his name in Nahuatl, which erroneously they say it means an eagle, a mistaken translation since se in Nahuatl means one, alluding to the number one and not to an eagle. A bad translation that overlooks the detail of the perhaps this was a calendarical name within the tonal poly of this character, and even if it was, sequentially, or one eagle give names to the penultimate trecena of the 2060 days of its count. Trecenas that today someone call weeks, but of 13 days, not 7 as we have today. The penultimate trecena of its count before the name, and each trecena had a ruler. Thus the Secuautli trecena, one eagle, is another metaphor for Mayahuel, because this trecena and the Secuautli day refers to Xochiquetzal, another deity of the humid and fertile earth. Symbolically, when the precious flower Xochiquetzal is buried in the earth, it transforms into a maguey, hence in association with Mayahuel. Thus the name in Nahuatl of the supposed discoverer of the image has a sacred message of the association with Mayahuel. Now, part of the functions performed by Mayahuel were resigned to the worship of the Virgin of Remedies, because aside from its conquering aspect, it was referred to as the patrons of rains and storms, the same function that Mayahuel performed through the magueys, because to maintain the fertility of the earth, the maguey helps to stop erosion and the washing away of cultive soil if there is too much rain, and if it does not rain, they resist drought, being able to survive if they are watered by hand with very little water. And if its sanctuary was in that area, it was precisely because the place was an area where requests for rain were made, but in substitution for Mayahuel, and in this location the Virgin of Remedies began to fulfill those functions. Because several times under Spanish rule, she was transferred to Mexico City Cathedral when there were served drugs and famines during the 7th century. And well, everyone is free to believe and profess whatever faith they want. But the historical reality is that one of the ancient temples of the hill, a new one was created. Men gave the maguey as its main symbol to the Virgin. Thus the syncretism of Buddha cured, which was a double-edged sword for converts to Christianity, for example, adopted in the movie The Other Conquest. To preserve their beliefs, the original inhabitants assimilated the elements of their worldview into the new images, so that their beliefs would survive despite the prohibitions. But at the same time, this new reproduction facilitated a fostered conversation for the Spaniards, and although the survivors of the war, even in silence, still saw Mayahuel when they saw the Virgin of Remedies and her new representations. Gradually, the generations that did not see the battles began to assimilate the Virgin. And now, in reality, the majority pray and ask things not to Mayahuel, but to the Christian Virgin. This is a syncretic myth of yesterday and today.